The water closed over Adaeze's wrist before she even understood what was happening. Rough hands dragged her through the crowd, her bare feet scraping against hot sand, and somewhere behind her she could hear her mother screaming her name like it was the only word left in the world. The crowd that had gathered at the riverbank did not part for her in mercy. They parted the way a crowd parts for a funeral procession, quietly, almost respectfully, because they believed they were about to witness justice. She was not a thief. She had never stolen anything in her life. But the coral bracelet, the one that belonged to the royal family, the one worth 15 goats, the one that had somehow ended up hidden in the bottom of her woven basket 3 days ago, did not care what she believed about herself. It only cared what the king's men had found, and what they had found was enough to kill her. "Please," she whispered, though no one was listening anymore. "Please, I didn't take it." 3 moons earlier, none of this had existed. 3 moons earlier, Adaeze did not know what it felt like to have the people who loved you most stand in a crowd and watch you die. She had been born to a river that almost gave up on her family. Okonkwo, her father, fished the great river of Umuofia for 7 years before his wife Adaeze's belly finally swelled with a child. 7 years of empty nets some mornings, 7 years of neighbors offering pitying smiles, 7 years of Adaeze weaving cloth at her loom and praying into the threads. When Adaeze finally came, screaming into the world on a morning when the river ran unusually calm, the elders said the river itself had decided to bless them. A river that forgets its source will one day run dry, the old women of Umuofia liked to say, teaching their children to remember where they came from, to never let pride make them forget the hands that raised them. Adaeze grew up hearing that proverb so often she could recite it before she could properly braid her own hair. She grew up believing it. She grew up living it, too, sharing her food before she finished her own portion, giving away her favorite things without being asked twice, the kind of girl elders pointed to when they wanted to praise a child in front of others. She had 2 friends who felt more like sisters. Chidinma, sharp-tongued and quick to laugh, the daughter of a goat trader. Ifeinwa, softer, more thoughtful, the daughter of a palm wine tapper. The 3 of them had grown up tangled together, grinding cassava side by side until their arms ached, swimming in the shallow bend of the river until their lips turned blue with cold, sitting beneath the old iroko tree at dusk telling each other stories until their mothers called them home. "We will grow old together," Chidinma used to say, linking her arm through Adaeze. 3 sisters of one heart, just like the elders call us. "Even when we're old and wrinkled and our husbands are tired of us," Ifeinwa would add, laughing. Adaeze believed it completely. She had no reason not to. The first crack came so quietly that no one, not even Adaeze, noticed it happening. Her mother, Adaeze, was the finest weaver in Umuofia, and the wrapper cloths she made for her daughter carried patterns no other hands could copy. Women in the market would stop Adaeze just to touch the fabric, to ask which dye created that particular shade of indigo, to tell her how lucky she was to have such a mother. Adaeze never hoarded the attention. She brought cloth home for Chidinma and Ifeinwa too, wrapped extra lengths around their shoulders, insisted they wear the patterns to festivals so the 3 of them would match. "It isn't right that only I should have something beautiful," she told her mother, and Adaeze smiled and wove a little more, a little faster, just to see her daughter's joy multiplied across her friends' faces. But cloth was never really the problem. Attention was the problem, and attention has a way of following certain people no matter how much they try to share it. "You always get noticed first," Chidinma said one evening, trying to sound like she was joking. They were walking back from the market, baskets balanced on their heads, the sun beginning to dip behind the palm trees. "Even when we are wearing the exact same wrapper." "That's not true," Adaeze said, laughing it off. "You imagine that?" "Did I?" Chidinma's voice had an edge to it that disappeared as quickly as it came. "Never mind. Forget I said anything." Adaeze forgot. She was good at forgetting things that made her uncomfortable, especially when they came from people she loved. She did not yet understand that some words, once spoken, do not actually disappear, they simply wait, quietly, for the right season to grow. If cloth had been the first crack, Adaeze's voice was the earthquake. She had always sung, at the riverbank while washing clothes, under the iroko tree while the other children played, in the kitchen while helping her mother prepare egusi soup. Nobody thought much of it at first. Plenty of girls in Umuofia sang. But there was something about the way Adaeze's voice moved through a melody, something that made grown men stop sharpening their machetes and grown women stop arguing over market prices, just to listen. By the time the village began holding small gatherings for naming ceremonies and harvest blessings, it had become tradition to ask Adaeze to sing. Chidinma and Ifinwa practiced for these same gatherings, humming melodies for hours under their breath, asking their mothers to teach them old songs, rehearsing until their throats grew sore. They received polite applause. Kind nods. The kind of praise people give because it is expected of them. Adaeze opened her mouth, and the entire square would go still. It isn't fair, Ifinwa admitted once, very quietly, to Chidinma, when they thought no one could hear them behind the cooking sheds. We practice and practice. She just opens her mouth. The gods gave her too much, Chidinma replied, and there was no laughter in her voice at all this time. Some people get everything. Some people get nothing. Neither of them said any of this to Adaeze's face. Both of them continued to smile at her, continued to walk arm in arm with her to the market, continued to call her sister. But something inside each of them had begun to harden, slowly, the way clay hardens in the sun, soft enough to reshape at first, and then one day, suddenly, impossible to bend without breaking. The Harvest Moon Festival was the grandest celebration in all of Umuofia, the kind of festival where kingdoms beyond the river sent their princes and their finest goods, where every family who could afford new cloth wore it, where the entire community gathered at the central square to eat, dance, and celebrate beneath torchlight. That year, the festival included something new, a singing contest, judged not by the village elders but by a visiting royal, Prince Is, son of the king from the kingdom upriver. Whoever won would sing before him, and rumor said the prince was searching not just for the finest voice in the land, but perhaps for something, or someone, more. You should enter, Adaeze told her friends, genuinely excited, the way she was excited about everything that involved the three of them doing something together. All three of us. It will be fun, whatever happens. Chidinma's smile did not quite reach her eyes. Yes, she said. Let's all enter. The contest stretched across 3 nights. Girls from every corner of Umuofia stepped forward to sing, their voices rising and falling beneath the moon while the crowd clapped politely and moved on to the next contestant. Ifinwa sang on the first night a song about the river's patience and received warm applause, the kind any decent performance earns. Chidinma sang on the second night, her voice steady and clear, earning nods of approval from the elders seated near the front. Adaeze sang on the final night. She chose a song her grandmother had taught her, about a fisherman waiting for his wife to return from the market, about love that does not need grand gestures to survive. She had barely opened her mouth before the noise of the crowd began to fade, conversation after conversation dying out as if someone had thrown water over a fire. By the time she reached the song's final verse, the only sound in the square besides her voice was the crackling of torches. When she finished, there was a silence that lasted just a heartbeat too long, and then the square erupted. Prince Is, seated beneath the royal canopy, did not clap immediately. He simply watched her, something unreadable crossing his face. Later, people would say it was in that exact moment that the prince fell in love, not merely with her voice, but with the way she had reached down, just before her turn, to comfort a much younger contestant who had stumbled over her words and begun to cry. Adaeze had knelt right there in the dust, in front of everyone, and whispered something that made the little girl smile again before standing up to take her own turn. She has a generous spirit, the prince said to his attendants that night. A voice like that is a gift from the gods. But a heart like that is rarer still. Adaeze won the contest. She did not gloat. She pulled Chidinma and Ifeinwa into a tight embrace the moment the elders announced her name, laughing, telling them they had all done so well, that next year surely one of them would win. Chidinma hugged her back. Ifeinwa hugged her back. And underneath both embraces, something cold and ugly settled deeper into their chests, because winning had stopped being about pride for Adaeze's friends a long time ago. It had become about survival, about who got to matter, and who did not. 3 days after the festival, royal emissaries arrived at Okonkwo's compound carrying gifts wrapped in fine cloth, kola nuts, and palm wine in clay pots sealed with wax. Princes wished to take Adaeze as his bride. The entire village seemed to hold its breath and then exhale all at once into celebration. Okonkwo wept openly. The 7 barren years suddenly transformed into the beginning of a story that ended in glory. Adaeze could not stop touching her daughter's face, as if checking that she was real. Adaeze ran straight to Chidinma's compound, then Ifeinwa's, breathless, laughing, hardly able to speak the words properly. "The prince has asked for me," she said, over and over, hugging them both. "Can you believe it? Me? I'm so frightened, I don't even know what palace life is like. What if I say the wrong thing in front of the king? What if?" "You'll be wonderful," Ifeinwa said, and her voice cracked slightly on the word wonderful. "I don't deserve any of this," Adaeze said, squeezing both their hands. "You two deserve this as much as I do. I promise you, whatever happens to me happens to all 3 of us. I will never forget where I came from. I will never forget you." She meant every word. She told them everything in the weeks that followed, her fears about palace customs, her worry that the queen mother would not approve of a fisherman's daughter, even small secrets about the prince's letters to her, the gentle things he had written. She trusted them with all of it, the way she had trusted them with everything since they were children old enough to share a single mat at nap time. It was that very trust that made what happened next so much harder to survive. Chidinma and Ifeinwa stopped pretending the jealousy was something they could simply outgrow. In hushed conversations at night, away from Adaeze's hearing, the resentment that had been hardening for years finally found its shape. "She gets everything," Chidinma whispered one evening as they sat outside Ifeinwa's compound, the moon thin and sharp above them. The voice. "The prince. Soon she'll be queen, and what will we be? The friends of the queen. People will only remember us because of her. What can we do about it?" Ifeinwa asked, though something in her voice suggested she already feared the answer. "I don't know yet," Chidinma admitted. "But there must be something. There must be some way to remind everyone that she is not as perfect as they believe." Neither girl said the word betrayal out loud. Neither girl, in that moment, fully understood how far the bitterness inside them was about to carry them. But the seed had been planted, and seeds, once planted, tend to grow whether or not anyone waters them on purpose. The opportunity arrived 3 days before Adaeze's wedding cloth was to be finished, when the 3 girls walked together to the river market to select fabric and beads for the ceremony. It was meant to be a joyful trip. Adaeze had insisted both her friends choose new wrappers for themselves too, paid for from the gifts the palace had sent. At the trader's store sat the royal coral bracelet, brought there that morning for minor repair, left briefly unattended while the trader argued with another customer over the price of indigo dye. Chidinma saw it first. She did not plan what happened next so much as she simply stopped thinking at all, the way a person stops thinking in the half-second before they do something they will spend the rest of their life regretting. "Ifeinwa," she murmured. "Distract him. Ask about the cowrie shells, anything." "Why?" Ifeinwa whispered back, already feeling something tighten in her stomach. "Just do it." Ifeinwa stepped toward the trader, asking loud, unnecessary questions about cowrie prices, her voice higher than usual, her hands trembling slightly though no one noticed. Chidinma's fingers moved fast, faster than her conscience could catch up to her, and the coral bracelet disappeared from the stall and into the bottom of Adaeze's woven basket, hidden beneath folded cloth, while Adaeze herself stood only a few feet away examining beads, completely unaware that her whole world had just shifted beneath her feet. It took less than a minute for the trader to notice the bracelet was gone. His shout cracked across the market like a whip. "Thief! Someone has stolen the royal bracelet." The market dissolved into chaos. Traders abandoned their stalls. A crowd formed almost instantly, the way crowds in Umuofia always seemed to materialize from nowhere the moment trouble began. The trader, red-faced and frantic, accused everyone near his store, and when the village head ordered the basket searched, it was Adaeze's basket, sweet, generous, beloved Adaeze, that surrendered the coral bracelet from beneath her folded wedding cloth. The square went utterly silent. "That isn't mine," Adaeze said, and her voice came out smaller than she intended, disbelief swallowing half her words. "It was found in your basket," the trader said, his fear of the crown overriding any sympathy he might have felt. "With my own hands I pulled it out." Adaeze turned, desperate, searching the faces around her for someone who would defend her, and found Chidinma and Ifeanyi standing among the crowd. For one terrible, suspended moment, she looked directly into Chidinma's eyes, silently begging her best friend to say something, anything, to explain that there had been a mistake. Chidinma looked away first. That single gesture, the simple act of two eyes refusing to meet hers, told Adaeze, somewhere deep beneath her shock, that something far worse than misfortune had happened to her. But she did not yet have the words for betrayal. She only had confusion and fear, and the sound of her own heartbeat pounding louder than the crowd's accusations. Word reached the palace within the hour. By the time the sun set, Adaeze had been brought before the king, not Prince Iza's gentle questioning, but the full formal weight of the throne, because the bracelet belonged to the royal family, and theft from the crown was no ordinary crime. "I did not take it," Adaeze said, kneeling before the king, her voice raw from repeating the same useless sentence over and over.
"I found it on the floor, my king."
"I swear on the river that raised me, I did not take it." "The bracelet was found in your possession," the king said, not unkindly, but with the heavy finality of a man bound by law older than himself. "Umuofia's laws are clear. Theft from the crown is treason. The sentence is death, by the river, at dawn, 3 days from now." Adaeze's mother collapsed where she stood. Her father had to be held upright by 2 men. And Prince, seated beside his father, said nothing at all in that moment, though his jaw clenched so tightly that those near him later swore they heard his teeth grinding. The 3 days that followed were the longest of Adaeze's life. Her family was shun almost instantly, the way fear makes communities turn cold even toward people they loved only days before. Okonkwo's fishing nets came back from the river half empty, as though even the water had abandoned them. Adaeze sat at her loom and could not bring herself to weave a single thread. Prince, against the explicit wishes of several of his father's advisors, began asking quiet questions across the market, questioning traders, questioning anyone who had stood near their stall on the day of the theft. He found nothing. No witnesses. No confession. Only silence, and a clock that would not stop moving toward dawn. "She did not do this," he told his father on the second night, frustration sharpening his voice. "I know her heart. I have watched her kneel in the dirt to comfort a crying child she did not even know. A heart like that does not steal. Hearts can be hidden, my son," the king replied gently. "And law cannot bend for love, however true that love may be. Unless proof is found, the sentence stands." No proof was found. The 3rd night arrived, and Adaeze sat alone in a small holding room near the palace, listening to her own breathing, trying to make peace with a death she had done nothing to deserve. Meanwhile, in 2 separate compounds across the village, 2 young women were quietly falling apart. Ifeanyi had not eaten properly in 2 days. Every time she lifted food to her mouth, she saw Adaeze's face in the marketplace, confused, betrayed, searching for help that never came. She lay awake at night replaying the sound of her own voice asking the trader about cowrie shells, the distraction that had made everything possible. Chidinma slept even less. She paced her room until her mother asked, with growing concern, whether some illness had taken hold of her. She wanted, more than anything, to undo what her own hands had done in that single reckless half-second at the store, but pride, and fear of the punishment that surely awaited a confession, kept her silent night after night, even as the silence itself became a second crime stacked on top of the first. Dawn came regardless of what anyone wanted. The entire village gathered at the riverbank to witness the sentence carried out, the same riverbank where Adaeze had learned to swim, where she had once raced Chidinma and Ifeanyi through the shallows laughing until their stomachs ached. Guards led her down to the water's edge, her wrists bound, the king and Prince E standing solemnly among the gathered crowd. This was the moment she had been dragged towards since the very beginning of this telling, the moment when the water closed cold around her ankles and her mother's scream tore through the morning air. "Please," Adaeze whispered, one final time, to no one in particular. "I didn't take it." And then, just as the guards prepared to lead her fully into the current, an old voice cracked through the crowd like thunder splitting a calm sky.
"You must stop this now!"
Every head turned. Old Mama Kayameka, the blind herbalist known throughout Umuofia for hearing what other ears missed and sensing what other eyes could not see, pushed her way forward, leaning hard on her walking stick, her sightless eyes fixed somewhere just past the king's shoulder. "I was near the trader's stall that day," she said, her voice trembling but unmistakably firm. "I cannot see faces, but I know voices, and I heard a girl ask too many questions about cowrie shells, in a voice too high, too frightened to be simple curiosity. And beside her, I heard another voice murmur something too quiet for anyone else to catch, but not too quiet for me." The crowd erupted into noise. The king raised his hand for silence. "Whose voices did you hear, old mother?" he demanded. Mama Kayameka turned her face, and though her eyes could not see them, her hand rose, unwavering, pointing directly toward Chidinma and Ifeanyi standing frozen among the crowd. "Theirs," she said. "I would know those voices anywhere. I have listened to them argue and laugh beside that river since they were children." Gasps rippled through the gathered villagers. Adaeze, still bound at the water's edge, turned to stare at her two oldest friends with an expression that held no anger yet, only disbelief, the last thread of hope and confusion tangled together. The king's voice rang out, heavy with finality. "Then let the river itself stand as witness. Bring them to the crossing stone. If they lie, the river will reject their feet, and the ancestors themselves will know their guilt." The crossing stone sat just downriver, a flat rock worn smooth by centuries of feet, believed by the people of Umuofia to swallow the footing of any liar who dared stand upon it and speak false words before the ancestors. Ifeanyi was brought forward first. She stood on the stone, her legs visibly shaking, the entire village watching in suffocating silence. "Did you take part in placing the royal bracelet in Adaeze's basket?" the king asked. Ifeanyi opened her mouth to deny it, and then her knees simply gave out beneath her, collapsing onto the stone in a heap of sobbing confession before a single lie could leave her lips. "It was me," she wept, pressing her forehead against the cold rock. "It was both of us. I distracted the trader while Chidinma hid the bracelet. I am so sorry, Adaeze, I am so sorry, please forgive me, please." The crowd's fury rose like a wave. Chidinma, seeing her friend break completely, no longer had anywhere to hide behind silence. "I did it," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, then louder, forced out by something that felt like it had been crushing her chest for 3 full days. "I planted the bracelet. I was jealous, I have been jealous for so long, of her voice, of her gift, of the prince choosing her over both of us. I wanted her to fall, just once, the way the rest of us fall. I never imagined," her voice broke entirely. "I never imagined they would sentence her to die for it. I am a monster. Do whatever you want with me, but please, spare her." The king's judgment came swift and absolute. "You have confessed before the ancestors and the crown. The law demands your lives in exchange for hers. Guards moved to seize them. The crowd roared its approval, ready to watch justice complete its circle. Wait. It was Adaeze's voice this time, still bound, still standing ankle-deep in the very water that had nearly claimed her own life only moments before, her cheeks streaked with tears she had not noticed falling. Please, she said, looking directly at the king. Don't kill them. The entire riverbank fell into stunned silence for the second time that morning. They tried to kill you, the king said, genuine confusion crossing his face. They let you walk to your death rather than confess sooner. You owe them nothing. I know what they did, Adaeze said, her voice trembling but steady beneath the tremor. I felt the water close around my feet because of them. But I have known them since we were children, sharing one sleeping mat between us. I have seen the goodness that still lives in them, buried beneath whatever jealousy grew there. If you kill them now, their lives end as nothing but the worst thing they ever did. I am asking for mercy, not because they deserve it, but because I refuse to let what happened to me turn into more death. The king studied her for a long moment, something shifting behind his eyes. Beside him, Prince E stared at the woman he had chosen to marry with an expression that looked very much like awe. Her voice won a contest, the king finally said, half to himself. But her heart may be the rarest gift Umuofia has ever produced. He turned to the guards. Release her. Unbind her hands. The ropes fell away from Adaeze's wrist. As for these two, the king continued, looking down at Chidinma and Ifeinwa, still trembling on the crossing stone, I will not take your lives, since the one you wronged has asked for mercy. But you will leave Umuofia before the sun sets today, and you will not return. Let your punishment be the years ahead of you, lived far from the people who once called you sisters of one heart. Neither girl protested. Neither girl, in truth, believed they deserved even this much mercy. They were escorted away from the riverbank that same afternoon, walking upriver with nothing but small bundles of belongings, neither one able to look back at the village that had raised them. 3 months later, princes returned to Okonkwo's compound, this time not with emissaries but in person, carrying gifts and a request that had not changed despite everything that had happened. I chose you before any of this began, he told Adaeze, kneeling before her parents in the traditional manner. And I choose you still, knowing now exactly the size of the heart I am asking to marry. Adaeze said yes through tears that finally, for the first time in months, were tears of joy rather than grief. Their wedding stretched across 7 market days, the entire kingdom celebrating with a fervor that seemed determined to erase the memory of what had nearly happened at the riverbank. Years passed. The old king grew tired and eventually passed his throne to his son. Princes became King Is, and Adaeze, the fisherman's daughter who had once nearly drowned for a crime she did not commit, became Queen of Umuofia. Together, they ruled with a particular attention to justice that the kingdom had never quite seen before. Among King Isa's earliest decrees was the abolition of the river sentence entirely, replacing it with trials that demanded thorough evidence and patient investigation before any verdict could be carried out. No one, the new king declared before his assembled court, should ever again stand where my queen once stood, sentenced to die for a crime someone else's jealousy invented. As for Chidinma and Ifeinwa, life upriver was neither cruel nor kind, simply quiet, simply far from everything they had once known, simply long enough for regret to settle permanently into the marrow of their bones. They never returned to Umuofia. They never needed to. The weight of what they had done traveled with them wherever they went, the way certain mistakes refused to stay behind no matter how far a person walks. Adaeze never spoke of them with hatred, not even years later, not even when her own daughters asked about the 2 women whose names occasionally surfaced in old village stories. She only ever offered the same lesson, the one she had carried up from the riverbank on the morning she should have died and somehow did not. Envy paddles against the current, she would tell her children, the same way the river songs of her own childhood had once taught her about patience and pride. It tires the one who rows far more than it ever harms the one being chased. Guard your heart against it, and guard your friendships even harder, because the people closest to you hold the power to lift you highest, or to pull you under, and only love decides which one they choose. The river of Umuofia kept flowing long after that morning, carrying water past the crossing stone, past the market stalls, past the compound where a barren couple had once waited 7 long years for a miracle. It carried, too, the memory of a girl who had nearly drowned for someone else's jealousy, and who chose, even in her darkest hour, to answer betrayal with mercy rather than vengeance, a choice that outlived every crown, every throne, and every gift the river ever gave.